Hi, this is John Majori with Majori on Bowie, and this is the Majori on Bowie YouTube channel, where I usually have a new interview every week that has something to do with David Bowie. Well, today I have an edited version of an older interview with Con Chrisoulis, the author and artist behind the great Rubble Rubble graphic biography series about David Bowie. I recorded this interview when this segment was very young. Consequently, not a whole lot of people saw the whole interview. It's here on the site if you want to see the 70-minute full interview with Con. But if you haven't seen it, this is an edited version. It's about half as long that gives you an idea of Con, his project, and what Rebel Rebel is all about. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you want to see the entire video, I'll link to it in the description. Come back on Saturday for a brand new interview.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on your blog, John. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so the project. So I began the project in 2018, right when Bowie died. Although it was already being planned in 2017 as the follow-up project to Rebel Rebel to Tales of the Smiths. So what had been happening was that no, did I say 2018 when Bowie died? Yeah, I meant 2016. So what happened was I'd been already working as a webcomics artist for well, I've been working in comics for many years. How back should I be going? I'll go a bit further back. I'll try to be real quick about this just in
Yeah.
case your audience is not aware of where I'm coming from. So I've worked as a kind of a comics artist for maybe 25, 30 years now, starting in Australia where I grew up. So I self-published there for years, just generic superheroic stuff. But then I moved to Athens, Greece, in the late 90s. And starting kind of in the early noughties, I became part of one of the instigators of kind of the new scene there. And I was self-publishing for more mature stuff there. So I was commenting a lot on what was going on in Athens at the time, kind of a lot of social upheaval, but I also had some comedic series and some other stuff going on at the same time. But that got me on my name known there, and actually I became one of the kind of the staple kind of comics artists in Greece of the new generation there. But then the kind of financial crisis happened in Greece. And as just as Greece got the got bailed out financially, I bailed out of the country to the UK. So I moved to Brighton initially, and in the UK, and yeah, I continued where I left off, except that in Greece, I was kind of just awarded kind of comics book artist of the year. And in England, no one knew me. It meant nothing, you know.
Yeah.
So at that point, I wanted to get out of kind of the really social political stuff that I was working on for so long. And it's taken up a lot of my time and a lot of my space, a lot of my creativity, and it was a lot of my kind of mental health too, to be fair. And I wanted to move into kind of other areas. I was starting to explore like graphic biographies. So I started doing the graphic biography of the Smiths, the band The Smiths.
Yep.
And that began as a web comic, and it was a daily web comic for a Greek chocolate company. This is, I don't know, this is like really, it will take too long to explain, but a
I
chocolate company.
normally do not associate the Smiths with Greek chocolate. I just have to tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So it's a really bizarre one. But what happened was, just as I'd left Greece, a chocolate company in Greece, the biggest chocolate company in Greece, kind of the equivalent of Cadbury called Eon, wanted to reach out to a new audience, you know, to new consumers. And they contacted Greece's kind of most prominent comics creators to do comics for them. Except then this was the good thing about it. They didn't care about the content. What they cared about was that you're there, that you're present, and that you're doing stuff for them. So I got paid to do a daily webcomic, and I was free of kind of choosing whatever I wanted as a topic. And I chose the Smiths, and they said they okayed it, which was bizarre. And I went with it. They gave me a 3-month period to kind of test it out. and it blew up. It went great with the Smiths fans all over the world, and that was about the formative years, the teenage years. This is what I was really interested in. So that's what I'm going to get in with Bowie too. As a fan of kind of Bowie and the Smiths and a lot of music groups, I'm not really. I know a lot already. From a fan, I know a lot already about the kind of the years where they were famous. I know a lot about Ziggy, the Ziggy years. I know a lot about the Smiths, when they recorded those albums in those 4 years that they existed. But in the biographies I'd read, that pre-existed, the prose biographies, I couldn't find a lot of information about the teenage years, how the
Yeah.
personalities were formed, these experiences they had that a lot of biographies alluded to.
Yeah.
And they'd say, oh, this happened in his life, he got beat up or something, and that this inspired his lyrics 10 years later. And you go, hey, this got a lot of meat actually, getting like beaten up by a lot of thugs in like London. It inspires your lyrics, but it surely means more, there's more to it than that. What's the context? What happened before and after?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but
Yeah.
I am going to ask about you devote quite a bit of time to Bowie's early years, which are not terribly well known. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think you're
No.
going in this direction anyway.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about your sources, and you're just on the verge of getting into that,
Yeah,
both in terms of the story, and then I'm going to pull up, take a closer look at this picture behind me.
Yeah.
Your sources for images. But so you're researching Bowie's early life, you're reading books. There's not a lot about his early life in it. So where do you go for information?
Okay, so this is the twist, right? And this is the difference between what I'm doing too, kind of like my sale pitch, let's say, to what other biographers have been doing already.
Yeah.
And especially what other graphic biographers are doing, what other graphic novels, because I mean with Bowie especially, he's been, his life's been tackled by other graphic biographers too. Now what I've been doing is, instead of going to other biographies, which again I feel just barely brush on his kind of formative years, I try to find as many sources as possible of Bowie himself narrating his experiences. Now, how do I do that? I purchase a lot of old music magazines, especially,
Yeah.
or I listen to a lot of radio kind of conversations that he had, or TV appearances, and I try to zone in, as much as possible. So, you can miss these details if if you're not concentrating a lot. And I try to find a quotes where Bowie's narrating his own life or experiences that he had at an early age. And believe it or not, if you look hard enough, you'll see that not only Bowie but the Smiths and any other person that's been interviewed, so much, at that extent, throughout their lives, you'll find that they have they've talked about a lot of things that have not been reported on in the past. And so that applies to Bowie, but it also applies to a lot of his acquaintances. So I do the same with Tony Visconti or George Underwood. So if any of his acquaintances have spoken to the press in the past, I'll try to find these quotes. Now, what I do is I get these quotes and I place them. I have a kind of a spreadsheet, and I place them in order of kind of significance, but also in thematic order. So, let's say the moment where Bowie's eye gets punched out by George Underwood in a fist fight, I'll take those. There's been a multitude of quotes there, so that's one problem. And the other problem is that a lot of the quotes are conflicting. So George Underwood would say, I punched his eye out, and Bowie would say his fingernail got caught in my eye, and it caused that permanent damage to one of his eyes. They'd also conflict regarding the reason why. Was it a girl? Was it another reason? So there's various quotes there that are conflicting, and I have to find kind of a middle truth there. And that's where I have to kind of I'd say, create a identify, the credibility of each quote. So, sometimes it might just be hearsay, like fans saying something on social media. Other times it might be, and then I had to chase it up to see if there's actually any substance to it. Other times it might be a direct quote from Bowie from an interview from the 70s. Other times it might be like an acquaintance's interview now in 2023, 24.
Yeah.
And that's also a bit fishy because what happens is Bowie's now dead, so he can't, he can't refute it. And no one else can either. And a lot of times you'll see that, there a lot of the Bowie's acquaintances are looking back at Bowie in an almost kind of, hagiographical way,
Yeah.
So, I don't take quotes. I try to, I suppose, dissect them as much as possible, regarding their credibility.
Right.
So I create a linear kind of narrative out of all those quotes, and then the story starts evolving from that. Yeah.
So I want to take a look at some of the visual images. You're working on a
Yes.
visual medium, and ask you about the sources for that too. And while you were talking about the story about George Underwood punching him in the face, I pulled up the cover of issue 4, which depicts that. I'll come back to that, but just something that occurs. Have you depicted any incidents or conveyed any information in your series that you haven't seen reported anywhere else?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I recently is like a year ago because I've been doing this since 2016. I mean, I should have. I was going to say before that I finished Tales of the Smiths. That was really successful. It got published as a collection from Omnibus Press, and then the same chocolate company hired me to continue with another series. And in 2015 we agreed to do Bowie, and then Bowie died. So we'd already agreed to it. And I got onto it immediately after he died, and it almost felt like I was getting on a bandwagon. But I was already working on it for almost 2 years to that point. In any case, so yeah, I have uncovered quite a lot of things that have never been spoken about or have been briefly brushed upon. So a lot of things. I'm not going to say that I'm discovering everything, but I'm unraveling it. So we knew that Bowie had at some point gone to a monastery, a Buddhist monastery, a Tibetan Buddhist monastery at some point called Samueling in Scotland. But when was not kind of clear. We knew it was kind of like around the time where he released his debut album, and what occurred there, other than like a quote or two, was not really clear. So I got into that. I was discussing that about a year ago. I tried to amass as much information as possible on that from Rinpoche, so the person that from quotes from Rinpoche, Chaim Rinpoche, who was his kind of mentor, from Bowie himself, quotes from and various other Lindsay Kemp, who he'd just met before going to the monastery. So I tried to find as much information as possible from the subjects themselves talking about that experience and unravel. So that's just one case. So that became, from I thought I wouldn't find anything on that, and actually it went on to kind of like a 10-page sequence in which and if you know from my comics, it's kind of like a text-heavy page each time. It's a lot. It was a lot of information, that hadn't been spoken about. That's just one case.
Fascinating. So let's look at some of your art, and I'm gonna start. I showed the cover of 4, but before we come back to that, let's take a closer look at the image that is behind me, and I'm going to ask a specific question about this. So this is the cover of chapter 5,
right?
And
yes.
Why don't you tell us what was the source material that you based this graphical depiction on? Like this was based on a picture.
Yeah, so this is kind of like one of the easier ones where my kind of the decisions I had to make, the creative decisions, but I already had a kind of a source that was kind of clear and definite to kind of base it on. So yeah, this is based on a photograph of Bowie with his kind of his saxophone when he kind of just joined the Conrads. So I should say that the episodes that I have as a webcomic, it's a weekly webcomic since 2016. I gather about 20 episodes, and each episode's collected then as a chapter. And in this chapter, and it's then posted to the people supporting the Patreon. So in this chapter, I collected 20 or 24 episodes. I can't remember how many. And they relate to his experience with the Conrads. So immediately after getting his eye damaged from George Underwood, one of the way that George Underwood could repent was to get Bowie to join the Conrads, in which he was already in. So yeah, I found kind of a photograph from the time, and and using my kind of, I've got this cross-hatching kind of, well, it's not cross-hatching technique. It's kind of like this squiggly, almost jaggedy, triangular kind of inking technique. I tried to kind of draw his likeness, but then also add the curtain at the back to kind of depict kind of the theatrical scenes that he was performing in at the time. So yeah, I'm going for kind of a black and white grayish aesthetic. And if you notice, if you look at the covers from like chapter 5, 6, 7, they're almost all of them are grayscale. Because then when kind of psychedelia kicks in Britain, you know, everything goes kind of technicolor, and there's an explosion of colors both in Bowie's life but also on my covers. So yeah, so one of the big problems that graphic biographers have, compared to someone writing, you know, a story of, you know, that's pure fiction, is that you have to. Well, you don't have to, but if you're feeling that you want to depict your subject in a truly kind of authentic way, in a way um, that is not, you know, that is purely based on facts, then one of the first problem that you face is how do you do it the minute you're kind of like drawing those in between moments where there's absolutely no evidence of what happens, you know, of what was spoken and what and how they behaved, you know, what the gestures of their bodies were like. So yeah, I mean, there's various kind of ways that you could go about that, and I mean, I've kind of looking back at it, and the method I've been using for the past kind of 15 years almost now that I've been working on purely on graphic biographies is kind of a method, almost a method writing method, like a Stanislavski approach to but not to acting, but to drawing. So I try to kind of once I've gathered all those kind of quotes, all those facts, and I've been, you know, I don't gather them in a day. This is the thing, you know, it's this I'm slowly accumulating these all these kind of real life events that happen in Bowie's life. So they're constantly kind of in my mind, and I'll go back and forth with them. I've got a live document that's online all the time. And I might be outside and I'll find something and I'll add it to that document. So I'm constantly ruminating, and I'll dip in and out of these moments, you know, try to relive them. And to be fair, this is something I don't know, because you know the first question was why you're doing this. You know, a lot of times the graphic biographer feels, you know, a certain amount of you know, relates to a certain degree with their subject, and you know, by using this kind of, by meditating on what I've written, you know, sitting back, kind of not rushing into kind of drawing it immediately or depicting exactly what's described in the quote. I'll sit back and kind of think about, okay, how's, you know, what is Bowie actually, you know, is actually like at this time? What is surroundings like? What's happening at the same time in terms of, you know, sociocultural context? So there's a lot of factors that I'll try to, you know, sit back and meditate on in an almost Stanislavski type way. Okay, so I mean the standard process of creating a comic is to, well, write a script, and then draw that script, and then color the drawings, and then put the letters in, or do it all at the same time and then get it published. So if you're working on your own, if you're not working in a team like I am at the moment, well, I've barely worked within a team in the past. I've mostly worked as a creator, as a comics creator on my own, you know, as an individual or solo creator. Um, I do all the things on my own. So my process is to start with that, accumulating the quotes, accumulating all the data, creating a linear narrative. So I've got a linear script going on at the same time after that. And then I go into penciling. So that means rough drawing with pencils, what I want my page to look like. And that's done on I haven't got any pencils here, unfortunately. I've got the inks though. And that's kind of at this is like a future episode that I'm working on
Yeah.
now.
But
That's done
what
on
is that on paper or is that a different
yeah.
material? Yeah,
So
paper.
it's on paper. So I'm still drawing traditionally.
Yeah.
I haven't gone full digital yet. I think I never will. So I'm still drawing on paper. That's one thing. And once after the pencils, I go into an inking phase. So I ink with I can show you my materials actually. I ink with yeah, like markers that are really small point markers, like 0.1, 0.2 markers. And I'll also ink though with a brush pen, like a pencil brush pen. So this
Yeah.
is a brush um that has a cartridge in it. You don't have to dip it into an inkwell. A lot of times people go, oh, you know, the Beatles, they existed only really from 63 to 1969, and yet they churned out what, 8 or 9 classic like albums where you can remember every single track, like
Yeah.
almost
Right.
150 tracks. And same with the Smiths, you know, you can remember every single track from those 4 albums that they did. So with Bowie, you know, it was although 68 to 70 or 66 to 70, where he did those first kind of out that first debut album, which a lot of people perceive as being kind of really campy or cheesy, you know, with Laughing Gnome, those types of songs. He was doing a lot of things that formed his later artistic decisions. And this is where I want to get, you know, in terms of the Ziggy Stardust stuff and the cover from the first collection, you know.
Yeah.
I'm already doing that in many ways. So every kind of like 10 pages, I'll jump into how this correlates, what's happening in his past, how that corresponds to something that happened later on in his life. You know, he'd meet a friend early on in his life, and that friendship would last, you know, for another 10 to 15 years. You know, I'm like in this chapter, in chapter 2. So this is just episode of the webcomic, something like episode 34. I talk about how infatuated he was with Robert Heinlein, the science fiction
Yeah.
writer,
Yeah.
and you know, I go into kind of um, a long kind of deep dive and talk about how that in turn, you know, fed into a lot of the narrative in Ziggy Stardust. So there's a lot of back and fro. So even though I'm in 68, and someone might go, I really don't want to read about what Bowie was like as a hippie in 1968 or something, or his mime stuff. That, you know, a lot of people hate mime already. So would they want to read a comic about Bowie miming? In fact, what's happening is what I'm doing is I'm reflecting on how all this experience, you know, was the backdrop of his famous years, of his famous gestures, of his famous, makeup, you know, how he applied makeup, how he carried on stage, how he wrote songs, what he was influenced by, like writers like Heinlein. You know, instead of going to drawing, you know, the famous years, Ziggy Stardust, which is what most graphic biographers do, and then kind of doing like really short bits where he talks about his past a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've alluded to this. Now people are watching this interview and they can't wait to start reading it. How can they do that? Where can you find, either online or in print? How do you get access to this?
So I have a Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, Patreon is.
I'll put a link in the.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
There we go. So it's patreon.com/Rebel Comics. So what happens is Patreon is a crowdfunding platform. Like Kickstarter, if you know Kickstarter. But instead of with Kickstarter, what happens is someone's trying to amass a big amount of money, let's say like 10 grand or something, and then print out a comic and send it, and then your relationship with them ends there and there. What I do is I try to I'm trying to get funding on a micro dosing scale. So small funding every month, so I can keep the costs running to keep doing the comic and the research. So someone can pay. So you pay in monthly installments. So if you pay just $1, which is ridiculous, I don't know. For some people, it might be too much. To be fair, I shouldn't have said that. But $1 is not a lot of money for a lot of people. Some people, for some it might be. Yeah, it might be insensitive. So for $1 a month, you can read the weekly comics for free. So it's a weekly comic. It's between 3 and 4 episodes per month. And with that $1, you can also read all the previous archive. So if you just pay $1, you can go and read all the previous episodes. And then if you continue backing me with that $1, super cool. If you pay though the higher tier reward tiers like $7 or $10, you can per month. Every 3 months, I'll send you one of the publications, and each publication contains 20 to 24 episodes.
Yeah.
And they have those, specific covers. I also draw kind of a dedication for each person that receives it, a little doodle, and I sign each edition. So it's not just, I don't just dryly put the thing in the envelope and send it to you. I do a dedication to you, and I draw a little doodle with Bowie on it and send it out. So every 3 months it's sent out. So in a year, if you back it with like $7 or $10 every month, in a year, every 3 months you receive an issue. So that means 4 issues in a year. So you'll receive, 1, 2, 3, 4 issues in a year. So that's about 100 pages of episodes of materials printed out. And this is all over the world, right? Not just the UK. So I've got patrons from the USA, predominantly from the USA and the UK.
Including me.
Yes, including you. Thanks a lot, John. And I've got a lot in Europe as well. So, but they're predominantly in the USA. And although, I know there's a cost of living crisis, a really heavy cost of living crisis now going on in the UK. I see a lot of patrons, a lot of artists, that is, sorry, not patrons, kind of having to put the prices up. I'm keeping the prices as is, at least for kind of the next year, or more, because now my biggest problem is posting. Is costing a lot for a lot of sending these out to like the States especially, but I'm keeping them down because I want these to reach the audience. It's not a thing of you might go, oh, you're getting $7 a month. That's like $30 every 3 months. Actually, the 2 of the months are going to printing and sending it out. So I have to try to get that message across. It's not a money-making venture. You're supporting the project to tag along until I finish it, because I've already got, as I mentioned, I'm academic. I've already got a morning job teaching and researching at Teesside University.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. And thank you. I mean, this is a real contribution.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. So let me close with asking a question I ask everybody, and I'm going to put you on the spot, which is, what is your favorite David Bowie song and album?
Oh man, that's there. Jeez, yeah. It's that
everyone has the same reaction.
Yeah, that change. Yeah, that's like it's like Sophie's Choice. You feel like if you don't say like low or something, that you're disowning your child and they're not going to speak to you again. It really changes. For a while it was Station to Station, because I'd been neglecting it for ages, and I was sick to death of listening to everything else. So I was like, both the song and the album, I was like massively obsessed with it for a while. I'd say now, because again, because I was I have to listen to the songs all the time. It's really hard for me to go, oh, this sounds fresh again, I'm actually going back to Ziggy Stardust again as my favorite album. This is crazy. It's like almost like a too classic choice.
Yeah.
And I'd say Lady Stardust. That is hands down now.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that song, I mean, lyrically too, it gets my kind of like the hairs on my arm kind of to stand up. It's a great song, and I didn't mention this at the start because one of the reasons I got really heavily into Bowie was Velvet Goldmine, the film, right?
Yes, yes.
Because before that, I knew, I listened to a bit of Bowie and stuff. He was so mainstream though for my taste. I was really into grunge and other alternative stuff, and it just felt like I grew up as Bowie as being this mainstream artist in the '80s. It didn't appeal to me at all. And then Velvet Goldmine came out, and I was already a grown up, and I went, holy sheez, I'm really into like, Kiss and all these bands and this is the template, he built this church, and Lady Stardust is really, although the soundtrack of Velvet Goldmine famously, he didn't allow his songs to go into Velvet Goldmine.
Which
Lady Stardust is the song, the soundtrack to it,
right. Yeah. Not to get sidetracked on that because we should end on the answer to that question, but I actually thought that it ended up working to the Todd Haynes, who made the movie, to his advantage. It gave him a kind of artistic flexibility while still conveying that sort of core message that's based in history. Anyway, whole other topic.
That's
come back and
film's
film talk.
a lot of people think it's hit and miss. For me, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. There's so much that we didn't cover but
for sure.
This has been terrific, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but I might ask you back. So this was a really great conversation and wonderful art, and I'm really very excited that you're telling the story in the way that you're telling it. So, Con Chrisoulis, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
That's great. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch.
Yes, for sure.